What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Today is December 15th, 2022. I'm joined by my co-host, Nolan. We're going to have a great episode of News and Notes, followed by an episode of FedWatch with Ansel Lindner and CK Snarks. But let's get into News and Notes. How goes it, Nolan? How are you?
Chris, I love life. Imminent hyper-Bitcoinization. Every day, it seems, we're that much closer to the Bitcoin standard being normalized. How do we know? Well, our big story today is Kevin O'Leary's testimony. Why is it a big story? Well, let's look into it. It's a big story because the whole FTX debacle has really created an amazing contrast for people in Bitcoin to both view crypto and mainstream media. They see how the sausage is made now. It's more obvious than ever how information is laundered, how narratives are constructed, how the system works to divert attention to different things. And Bitcoiners caught the trick yesterday. They caught the magic trick. They caught Kevin O'Leary trying to take a rabbit out of a hat when Kevin O'Leary tried to blame it all on CZ and Binance. Now, we've seen for a while that Binance has its own troubles. We cover it on the show here. We're not here to pump any Binance tires, that's for sure. But we certainly are here to call frauds frauds. And everyone noticed that Kevin O'Leary tried to suggest that it was all this crypto thing and da-da-da-da. He forgot to mention the Ponzi. He forgot the Ponzi part, right? The Ponzi part is pretty important. And we know that our audience, folks who watch this show, folks who come to our event in Miami, May 18th to 20th, are some of the most financially literate people in the world. And now they also understand information laundering. We know how money laundering works. We've seen that, right? That's why we have the system we have, because we know the whole money laundering system, anti-money laundering system, is an even bigger scam than the amount of money laundering that's actually going on in the world, which is substantial, and they don't catch anyone apparently. But information laundering, even more insidious, and Bitcoiners are onto them. We're onto them. That's the good news. If you come to our show, May 18th to 20th in Miami, it's all about energy literacy. We're going to help you with all the information laundering protection you need to make sure that no one hijacks your brain, right? We don't want anyone hijacking your brain. We want your brain on Bitcoin. The only thing that is good for you, the only thing that's healthy out there, right? Everything else going to confuse you, going to involve you in incentive traps, confusion. We're going to do a ton of stuff on energy literacy. One of the big points of our event this year is really to hone in on energy literacy. We don't want any of our attendees to not understand why they have brownouts in their area. We don't want that. We want to underline how Bitcoin can actually get us away from the incentive trap the petrodollar created to really lay an innovator's dilemma trap out there. So we haven't seen abundant energy the way we deserve to have in a free and open society based on our level of understanding of technology. All of that's going to get unleashed because of Bitcoin. That's the good news. We're bringing utopia to you, May 18th to 20th. Bitcoin winter is going to be over by then. It's going to be the best. Energy is going to be there. We're going to be there. Everyone's going to be there. It's going to be awesome.
Well, I'll play the clip now. So there's a clip of Senator Pat Toomey, talking. Oh, go ahead. Yeah. You're saying all?
Yeah, this is the information laundering, right? This is it. This is how information is laundered. Right? We're here to help you from getting information laundered. We don't like that.
Yeah, so here's the clip of Senator Pat Toomey asking Kevin O'Leary a question, and I'll let you decide after playing this clip.
Why do you believe FTX failed?
I have an opinion. I don't have the records. Here it is. These two behemoths that own the unregulated market together and grew these incredible businesses in terms of growth were at war with each other. And one put the other out of business intentionally. Now, maybe there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe there's nothing wrong with love and war. But Binance is a massive, unregulated global monopoly now. They put FTX out of business.
Why do you believe?
So that was the clip. Yeah. So basically, Kevin O'Leary says that you intentionally put their competitor out of business. They own a monopoly on all exchanges, apparently. I guess he's negating Coinbase here in the United States. But yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts there, Nolan?
That's how information is laundered, right? That's how it's laundered. You create a situation where you've got a testimony now to refer to, right? Now you've got this thing where So the information goes like this, right? It starts with 0% credibility, but then he goes into a congressional testimony, and he was there with the OC writer who also had, like, he thinks crypto is stupid, but doesn't know anything about Bitcoin, I guess, because never mentioned it in the book, which is fine, right? Keep your focus on crypto if that's who you are. Some other idiot, I don't know who that other idiot was, but they only got a few people to testify, right? Well, are these the right people? It doesn't look like it to me. They brought these people, they went and testified. Now, what went from 0% credibility now has, 20% credibility in people who take this stuff seriously, these testimonies. So it went from 0 to like a 10. Right? It's like a 10% global, like, 20% of the people who take these things seriously, maybe that's 50%. So maybe it's 10% now, credibility. But then other people are going to cite it, and they're going to step up the credibility of this until they've got something that half resembles a schizophrenic story. And that's what we're up against here. But that's why we do our events the way we do it. That's why Bitcoin spreads through meetups. That's why Bitcoin and information spreads in a P2P way, right? The only people you can trust at this point to give you information doesn't mean it's right or wrong. You just know where it's coming from, right? Are people who are part of the Bitcoin world, people who are part of the Bitcoin Center. Don't believe them necessarily. You just know where they're coming from. That's a start. At least you know where they're coming from. At least you can calibrate your conversation with them from the point of view of where they're coming from. These folks, like Kevin O'Leary, hard to tell where they're coming from because it's all trapped in the black box of fiat credit and financial shenanigans. And that's why our events focus on information laundering protection. We focus on financial literacy and energy literacy because in the end, the key to all of this is getting the energy policies right. We need to do that.
Yeah, I mean, truth and beauty, isn't that right, Nolan? Truth and beauty.
We love the truth and beauty stuff. Remember when SBF in his first initial Twitter thread, when he was talking and admitting to his culpability during the FTX crash, ended it all with the tweet "Truth and Beauty," and of course, "Truth and Beauty" is a famous poem, really underlining that you don't need to look further than everything in front of you to understand what's going on. And he mentioned that in relation to everything we see with FTX, the political involvement, the corruption, the absolute disregard for any normal behaviors. It was all there. We don't need to know the truth. We don't need Kevin O'Leary to come out and explain it to us, his theories that he wants to share. We know what happened. We saw it with our own eyes. The good news is we're less susceptible to brainwashing than other people. Thanks to Satoshi, we're less susceptible to brainwashing. He did that for us. It's great.
Well, I have another brainwashing clip here. So it's from the same Senate hearing. Senator Marshall is saying how Bitcoin is nuclear, how it's used for drug trafficking, how it's a horrible thing. So take a moment and watch this clip with us real quick.
Again, this feels like a nuclear bomb is going off and we're not getting our arms around it. That's why we should be considering a pause. 90% of the dark web drug sales are done with cryptocurrency. Would you agree with me that cryptocurrency is a threat to our national security?
Potentially, it is a threat to our national security.
Potentially. I mean, we have 200 Americans dying every day from fentanyl poisoning, and I assume most of those the money laundering going on is done with crypto. Again, this feels.
So, he said he equated cryptocurrencies to doing drug trade and how people from dying from fentanyl. But I would assume like 95% is done with fiat currency, more specifically the US dollar. It would be, with Bitcoin, it's a public ledger that lives on forever. I mean, we've talked about, you can see Satoshi sending Bitcoin from himself to Hal forever. Like, so if there was some nefarious action going on, you can investigate or figure out what was this transaction on a long enough time horizon. I think that this is very nefarious to say Bitcoin. I don't think criminals use it. I think they use the US dollar. But I don't know. That's just me. What are your thoughts here, Nolan?
Well, we see exactly what we were talking about. It's information laundering 101, because now you've got the quote. Right? Now you can refer to this story all the time, which can be done. You can add step up credibility, especially if you associate it with something like fentanyl, which is one of the worst things going on in America today. There's no doubt about it. We can't look away from the fentanyl situation. It's so bad. Yet it doesn't seem to come up in any other instance. Why isn't it the number one issue on other platforms? We don't know, right? Now, all of a sudden, when you're talking about Bitcoin, it becomes relevant and you mention it and it gets brought up. Well, these folks know what they're doing, right? They understand how to launder information and they understand the guilt by association. All this thing was missing was an association with the white supremacists to make it the full package of toxicity, right? Then it would have been accurately honed for its effect, which is just to tarnish anyone associated with these subjects. So I would believe the fentanyl argument if I saw any inclination on the part of Washington to stop the fentanyl. And how do you stop the fentanyl? It's not border security. It's none of those things. It's taking seriously international trade with China and the Mexican cartels. And that's not being done in America at all. The seriousness is from China and trade. The Communist Party of China is involved in this. They ship the raw materials to Mexico and Mexico sends it to us. So if we're not going to have a conversation about the real thing and we think it's a border security and what people are paying for the fentanyl, it's already here. By the time the transactions are going through to pay for the fentanyl, it's here. So what about all the fentanyl that's here? They don't want to talk about that, right? They want to talk about who's making money at the point of transaction, right? Well, I hate to break it to you, but I bet a lot of this is barter that's done in the back of disgusting places with physical trades going on of body fluids. All right.
Yeah.
So this is not just limited to that, you know, and my wife was just showing me a joke the other day about, you know, having to get the sister out of a heroin thing and how she's not that bad yet, because once you get to a certain addiction, every day is like a Zelda quest. Like you've got to go and get your fix, right? First, it's like get some money to get it. But in the end, it's what I just described, right? As awful as that sounds. So the problem is not the money, who's buying what. Now, what you need is the type of community around you that understands all of this stuff. And it's really only Bitcoiners that are there, that are sharing information, protecting you from the brainwashers and the people who would make you think this way. So again, that's why Bitcoin meetups are so strong. That's why Bitcoin community is so strong. But we got to remember, anyone listening to this stuff and being abused by this stuff, we've got to be there for them and ready to explain to them, look, you've been lied to. If you think that Bitcoin is a threat to national security because of the fentanyl, find out where the fentanyl came from. People don't talk about where it comes from. Where it comes from is everything. And if we're not ready to have that conversation, we're not going to solve a thing. And it also not border security. That ain't going to do it. It's deeper than border security. A wall ain't going to protect you from fentanyl. I hate to break it to you.
Yeah, no, I agree. You got to get to the root cause of the issue. But we have our issues here in the United States, especially with the federal government, as we see a bunch of senators wanting to throw regulation at the wall and see what sticks. Well, the globalists also want to control Bitcoin. So, Nolan, if you could break down the story for us.
Isn't it World War Bitcoin right now? Right? It's World War Bitcoin. Everyone's coming out. Everyone's coming out of the woodwork. So now we've got the G20 talking about building a consensus amongst itself on how to regulate crypto. And of course, Bitcoin gets drawn in. They want to have some form of policy that allows for, again, what we can only imagine is the global surveillance system that was used to deputize the financial sector from global law enforcement. So they deputize the banking sector to do their job. We can only imagine it attempts to replicate that same system where they can start telling Bitcoin node operators, Bitcoin service providers, oh, by the way, you're also involved in law enforcement now. And if you don't do it, don't do our job for us and catch the criminals and all that, well, we're going to get you. All right. So that's another one of these things where service providers now are going to be attacked. And we saw this coming, but it's amazing to see it all happen at once like this. Right?
Yeah, I agree. Well, there's another coordinated attack. So a man in the suit sets the interest rates for the world yesterday. So, I mean, when you give centrally planned economies or central banking, basically you have control of the world and its money supply. So Jerome Powell infamously raised rates another 50 basis points. And interest rates are now at the highest rates since 2007. Obviously, 2007, they have been on a long, 30 to 40 year decline from the 70s till then, after Paul Volcker tried to snuff out inflation. But right now, with the rising interest rates, we've seen countless layoffs of many big corporations, even here at Bitcoin Magazine, Crypto Winter, hitting us, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, this is what we're trying to get away with Bitcoin. Programmatically in the code that about every 10 minutes, a block comes in, and we know the issuance of Bitcoin from now until 2140. And then after that, the network will propagate off of the fees of the network. Nolan, anything else you want to add there?
Well, I'll tell you what I like about Jerome Powell. He's a lawyer who had no experience with interest rates or anything. I only like it because I'm trained as a lawyer as well. So I bring a certain legal frame to the world of economics. I guess he brought his legal opinions to some preternatural sense of what interest rates ought to be in order to nudge folks. We all know the job is about marketing. We all know the job is about communications. And if you want to know more about the marketing and communications and all the angles the Fed use, FedWatch coming up at the top of the hour, or sorry, 12:30, or just after the show. So when this show's over, we're going to start FedWatch. And they're going to talk a lot more about dollar wrecking ball, dollar milkshake, what's going on with the Fed action yesterday and how it relates to stuff. But it's still part of the world war Bitcoin. It's not over, right? We've got all these folks and globalists and what's going on. Well, another Bitcoin mixer operator has been arrested, and that's U.S. officials arrest operator of the Bitcoin of a pretty large Bitcoin mixing service. It's Roman Sterlingov, who faces 3 charges of unlicensed money transmission, money laundering, and money laundering without a license, and that's with Bitcoin Fog. So this is an old mixer that's been around for quite a while, and here we go, right? World War Bitcoin, it's happening. It's happening. They're coming after folks, policies changing, coordinated G20 efforts. The good news is we're the most energy literate, we're the most financially literate, and we know all about the brainwashing. So we're ready to take them on. We're ready to take them on.
Yeah, just kind of, this is a fun fact I wanted to throw there in there. So the highest fee ever potentially was paid just yesterday. So someone paid 3.4 Bitcoin as a fee, or 337,000 sats per VByte for their transaction. Not only, so you think that this would be a large amount of Bitcoin being transferred for only 0.26 Bitcoin. To give a caveat, the medium fee for that was 20 sats per VByte. And he paid obviously 337K. So like, orders of magnitude higher. I was talking to Nolan before the show about this. It's very, very interesting that they paid this when like it seems like they just fat fingered it. In the address that it's consolidating down to, there's 140 Bitcoins in there. So obviously it's a person that has, I would assume, has been in the Bitcoin industry for a while. At least, to have 140 Bitcoins, you have to have a decent amount of money in order to do so. Yeah, it seems like it was a fat finger mistake. Very, very interesting how Bitcoin works and how it operates, but it seems like they grossly overpaid to get their Bitcoin into the next block. They could have paid like 100 sats per VByte and they'd be guaranteed, not 337,000 sats per VByte. Nolan, anything you want to add there?
Well, it's a pretty high time preference for such a big hodler of Bitcoin. So something happened there. I can't imagine a Bitcoiner being so pressed for 10 minutes that they need to lose 3 Bitcoin. But I don't know. Who knows? Some people are crazy, right? It's World War Bitcoin. Maybe they were fleeing some country and had to get out at that minute, and there was something, had to pay someone to get on a plane. Who knows? The world is crazy. They might have been fleeing New York.
Yes.
They might have been fleeing New York. It might have been New York. The Department of the Superintendent of Financial Services in New York, happy with the bid license. They want more. It's time for more crap. And what they want to do now is that anyone who wants to involve themselves in Bitcoin that's already licensed, so there is a form of grandfather that established financial institutions can use. There's a type of grandfather clause where they can get involved in Bitcoin and digital assets in general. And what they want to do now with this is actually slow that all down and add more time delays to the bid license itself, thereby, further repelling people from New York, because I guess New York is so important that everyone has to be there and is willing to wait even longer in order to do stuff. Maybe not. We'll see. We'll see, New York.
Yeah, isn't New York like a sanctuary state too? So they want to welcome people in, but they also want to push people out. So it makes no sense, I guess.
Yeah, didn't they declare like a state of emergency or something though? Because sanctuary, they finally had to realize that sanctuary had like economic
Yes. Yeah.
There was a cost and there was a cost benefit, or at least it cost money. It wasn't an infinite amount of folks you can house. So that
Yeah.
changed recently.
Yes, it did. Well, the European Central Bank seems to be missing by just a half. What do I mean by this? I'm taking a Greg Foss quote. The worst allocation of Bitcoin is 0 Bitcoin. You at least should get off 0, or at least that's what we recommend. Well, the European Central Bank has chosen to use encryption. That's awesome. That's cool. But the encryption they're using for their CBDC is the same as Bitcoin. So they're using SHA-256 encryption to build out a CBDC that they want to control, that they want to manipulate and all this. But we already have SHA-256 encryption. We have it for many banks, for many financial institutions. The government uses it to protect a lot of secrets there and databases and all that. But the best form of money that we know in the world right now is Bitcoin, and they use SHA-256. No reason to create a CBDC. I don't know what it's going to do better. I really don't know what it's going to do better. Just use the best form of SHA-256 for money. Nolan, anything you want to add there?
The good news is the enemy class that runs these things are some of the stupidest people in the world. So we don't need to always look for logic. We can just ascribe a lot of it to they're dumb. Yeah. They're dumb. They read it and they went, oh, that looks cool. That's fine. But not everyone's dumb, right? It might be World War Bitcoin. There might be terrible troubles in this place and that. But it looks like Satoshi Nakamoto, the namesake of Japan, gets things right. Yesterday, we led off our show talking about how the largest utility in Japan, the Tokyo Electric Power Company, is going to be using Bitcoin mining to manage load balance for the grid, which is not just mining a bit of Bitcoin with your leftover electricity. It means running the whole thing hotter because you have a way to balance the load now. But Japan now also creating a friendly tax environment for virtual currencies and Bitcoin service providers to operate in Japan. So from now on, the Japanese system will allow a much greater tax flexibility, therefore letting the companies in the country that are having trouble, their corporate taxes operating in the country, have the flexibility they'll need to survive all that's going on right now with FTX and the other folks. So Japan, again, I continue to think they're always one step ahead, and there's a reason why Satoshi Nakamoto took the Japanese pseudonym in order to have the moral authority to say, here's what's going on in Japan. It's coming to you in the rest of the world. We destroyed our money first. We also have the most advanced economy in the world and the most advanced electrical infrastructure in the world. Not quite there yet, but I think Japan is going to lead the way in many ways towards the Bitcoin standard because they don't have a choice. They don't have a choice. Either they do it or Japan will be a very different place. So
and I know you were saying they have the most robust electrical infrastructure. I think they also have some of the best best and fastest high-speed rails. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if you know much about Japan.
I've lived there, and I was a lawyer there, and spent quite a bit of time there. Have set up a business there. Go back pretty regularly. My wife is actually half Japanese, so that's I'm lucky enough to my children even have Japanese middle names, so I'm that close to it. I lived in Korea as well. I think it's sometimes the fastest train in the world. I think that there's one short line in China that's faster, but it's I've been on it. It's just the Shanghai airport train, and it doesn't go anywhere. Like it would be like if you were in New York and you took a train from Newark to I don't know, Yonkers. There's no point to where this thing goes. It doesn't bring you anywhere. So it was just a way to steal technology from the Germans who built it, is what I understand. The Japanese do have one of the fastest trains in the world, but it's not just that, it's everything. It's all the infrastructure, it's the trains, everything. And it's an amazing place for that. And they've got the nuclear, and I imagine they're going to have the small modular nuclear shortly as well, because they had to have a wholesale change of their nuclear energy policies after the Fukushima Daiichi meltdown in 2011 or 12. But nevertheless, when that big earthquake and tsunami came through, they had a whole new way to look at the energy infrastructure in the country. And one can only hope. And then, as I understand, they did find a ton of the rare earth metals in the water off the coast of Japan. So hopefully they become a major location to extract all of these minerals. That would be pretty interesting.
Yeah. Well, going from Japan to not too far away in Korea, where you also resided, what's going on there?
Well, we don't know exactly exactly what's going on there, but we do know the FTX story that just keeps on giving, right? We found out that they used a Korea wallet in order to move a lot of funds that were the funds that are in question and are the funds that a lot of people have questions about as far as the forensic analysis of the fraud and Ponzi that went on at FTX. So Korea getting involved, I think Korea is going to be one of those places. Well, I learned about, when you worked in these places, I would earn Korean won and USD. Korean won and Japanese yen. And they were so aware of the manipulation of their own currency vis-a-vis the US dollar. But that's where I learned about just normal people Forex trading. Normal people in those countries Forex trade. Like if you go for a coffee with a person, who you just met in college or whatever, they're like, yeah, I Forex trade. That I had never known about that. That was brand new to a North American. No one had ever seen anything like that. And when you saw it, in this case, it was totally different and unique to see normal people trading. And that's what even clued me in beforehand that it would be that Bitcoin, something like Bitcoin, would have a great use case, because I just didn't understand about arbitrage between foreign exchange currencies. That was a new subject to me. And watching it at an important time in life, it was just around the time of Bitcoin. I was actually in Tokyo when the white paper was released. I was living there. So there you go.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's really, really cool stuff. Well, last story of the day ends on a high note. Always got to end on a high note. So Nostr is getting fully funded via text message. So a couple of the Nostr developers were kind of in a group chat. It seemed that Jack Dorsey was in that. And he just decided, hey, I'm going to give you guys a grant, a Bitcoin grant, 14 Bitcoin to be exact, to help them build out their censorship-resistant global social media platform. So shout out to Fiat Jaff and a bunch of the other developers there. They are trying to build a more robust, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is. They're trying to open source all of it. If they're competing with the likes of the big dogs, and hopefully it'll get easier and easier to use, and it'll be better and more secure and more censorship resistant than everything else. It was very, very cool. Anything you want to add there, Nolan, before we get to FedWatch?
Yeah, it's again, people you see on the internet these days, people attacking Jack Dorsey. Maybe it's narrative bias on my part. I know that from the start of it, I said, I think Jack Dorsey at Twitter was unaware things were being kept from him. There were rogue elements. There were insurrections going on. So I continue to see that story play out. I continue to see someone who was lied to, who was misled, who said to Congress what they thought was true. And again, you can see in other actions where this person's attention and focus is, it's always been on Bitcoin. And I can't imagine someone interested in Bitcoin being such a subversive element to normal free speech. So again, it could be narrative bias on my part, but I am there to defend him until I see otherwise. And it's examples like this that make it so easy, because we see the investment last week in Gridless, the Bitcoin mining that will go at the heart of not mining excess energy, funding and financing the creation of hydroelectric dams in Kenya. So putting Bitcoin finance at the center of, financing decentralized electrical grids. So really interesting stuff. And when we extend it to what he's doing here, the idea of a censorship-resistant global network, whether it works or not doesn't really matter. Seeing how innovation is happening, seeing him involved in things that simply need to happen in order for this whole World War Bitcoin to be won by the right guys, right? World War Bitcoin happening now. We don't want to lose. We don't want to lose. And we need stuff like this. So when I look at the playing field, when I look at the characters, when I look at the battle lines of World War Bitcoin, I'm glad he's there sending 14 Bitcoins to folks who are building tools that will help us win the fight, help us win the fight.
I agree. Well, I think that's it for news and notes today. Don't forget to get your tickets to Bitcoin Miami or Bitcoin 2023, May 18th through the 20th. You can use code BMLive to get 10% off your tickets. Ticket prices are actually going up tomorrow, so Friday at midnight Eastern. Please get your tickets before then, before they go up. Maybe a good holiday gift. You can get some tickets for some family members and have a little vacation in Miami with us. It's going to be a great time. It's not going to be winter. It's going to be May. It's going to be nice. Miami's nice in May. So it'll be a good time. Hang out with us, and we can talk more about all the craziness of Clown World. So I'm going to be joined by Ansel and CK in a moment for an episode of FedWatch. So stick with us after the break. Have a good one, everyone. Peace.
You are listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Number one Bitcoin Magazine Live. You are listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Number one Bitcoin Magazine Live. Samba.
What's up, everybody? We are back. Another episode of your favorite macro central bank podcast. My name is Ansel Linder. Also back to the show this week is CK. CK, how are you doing, man?
What's up? I'm back. Sorry I've been gone for so long, but happy to be back. And I personally have been listening to FedWatch with you and Nolan, and really enjoying you two dissecting everything in macro. But I'm going to come back here and jump right back in. So thanks for covering.
Awesome. Yeah, we missed you, man. Lots going on this week, so I'm really glad that you could join. This week is, of course, FOMC. Just happened yesterday. We have CPI to cover. Not just the Fed either, but the ECB raised rates as well. So we'll go through part of their statement. So lots to do here today. If you guys are watching right now, like, subscribe. Let's get these numbers up. Share in the bear.
Let's go, baby. So, best information in macro. Absolutely.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Here on Bitcoin Magazine.
More admin notes up front is FedWatch, the podcast version, is leaving its own feed and going onto the Bitcoin Magazine feed. So this will be the last episode that is on its own feed. Just go and find the Bitcoin Magazine feed and make sure you're subscribed, and you'll find it there every week. Also, I do live streams that you can follow at Ansel Linder on Twitter Spaces or in the Telegram, t.me/Bitcoin and markets. Been doing those pretty much every weekday. So would love to have you guys come over and listen into those. All right, CK, do you have any admin notes up front?
Yeah, I fixed my lighting. So that's one admin note. But no, hey, Nolan has been saying this on Bitcoin Magazine Live and the breakup, but come celebrate the end of Bitcoin winter in warm and sunny Miami, May 18th through the 20th at Bitcoin 2023. I am personally so excited to be there. We are hard at work planning an awesome event. And, you can expect a little bit of a FedWatch and some other goodies over at the Bitcoin conference. So we are bringing together what is left of this industry, and we are going to show force in Miami, May 18th and the 20th. And I cannot wait. So come to the biggest Bitcoin event in the world, BM Live. That saves you 10%. Actually, I believe that there is a code available if you go check out our social media to get a boat. It's almost like a buy one, get one half off on your Bitcoin ticket. So that is only available through the holiday season, and ticket prices still go up tomorrow on Friday. So get your Bitcoin conference ticket today. All right. And that's the housekeeping from me. I'm excited to get back into it. Yesterday was an FOMC meeting. Powell coming in with big words. We are going to play some of those videos here and dissect them live on the show. So, Ansel, should we just get right into it?
Yeah, we can get into the Powell clips. I do have some slides on the deck that we'll go through along with that. But yeah, setting this up, they raised 50 basis points, exactly what the market expected. I mean, I think it was like 90% were on the CME FedWatch tool was expecting a 50 basis point hike. They did not disappoint the market. A lot of people in macro and a lot of macro podcasts, they go in and interpret what Powell is saying. We're going to show you exactly what Powell is saying and then give our opinions on top of that. So yeah, I have the important parts picked out here. And if you are ready, Chris, I think we're ready for the first one.
The U.S. economy has slowed significantly from last year's rapid pace. Although real GDP rose at a pace of 2.9% last quarter, it is roughly unchanged through the first 3 quarters of this year. Recent indicators point to modest growth of spending and production this quarter. Growth in consumer spending has slowed from last year's rapid pace, in part reflecting lower real disposable income and tighter financial conditions. Activity in the housing sector has weakened significantly, largely reflecting higher mortgage rates. Higher interest rates and slower output growth also appear to be weighing on business fixed investment. As shown in our summary of economic projections, the median projection for real GDP growth stands at just 0.5% this year and next, well below the median estimate of the longer-run normal growth rate.
All right, so can we bring up the chart that is slide number 5? This is the chart that he was just talking about. It is the change in real GDP. And what I wanted to say about this chart, first 2 things. This is real GDP, so this is minus their inflation, which they use PCE to subtract from nominal GDP to get the real GDP. And you can see it in 2020, huge dip, obviously, from COVID and the lockdowns. And then it skyrocketed over 5% in 2021. And now they're projecting for this year to have 0.5 and also next year 0.5% GDP growth. So that is a huge decline. All right. And a lot of people that are betting on a really hard recession coming, I think what people are getting tricked a little bit in, they're feeling this huge crash from 5 or 6% GDP down to basically 0. And it feels like a recession. So that's all I wanted to say about this chart. CK, do you have any thoughts?
I mean, people are definitely feeling it. So if I could just add in a little bit of like man on the street sentiment analysis, people are stashing cash. They're upset about how expensive rents and mortgages are. And I just think that people, and obviously, jobs being lost, things are getting tight. And this deleveraging, if you will, that's kind of being forced on the market right now. Everyone is feeling it. We're seeing it kind of just ripple through the economy. So, I don't know, how much sentiment data and just talking to people, actual people in the economy kind of goes into making these projections. But, everyone and their mother knows that things aren't right now.
Absolutely. Oh, and I also wanted to point out on that chart, you don't have to bring it back up, Chris, I'll just talk about it, is the, the projection is to slowly get back to 2% growth. Now, 2% growth is horrible. It's absolutely horrible. It feels like, if you're growing at 1 or 2%, it feels like you're in a depression, right? It feels like, and that's what we've had since the great financial crisis, really. So they're just they're even in their best case here, they're just projecting getting back to a shitty economy, which I think is crazy. All right. Are we ready for the next clip? All right. Let's roll it, please.
Despite the slowdown in growth, the labor market remains extremely tight, with the unemployment rate near a 50-year low, job vacancies still very high, and wage growth elevated. Job gains have been robust, with employment rising by an average of 272,000 jobs per month over the last 3 months. Although job vacancies have moved below their highs and the pace of job gains has slowed from earlier in the year, the labor market continues to be out of balance, with demand substantially exceeding the supply of available workers. The labor force participation rate is little changed since the beginning of the year. FOMC participants expect supply and demand conditions in the labor market to come into better balance over time, easing upward pressures on wages and prices.
All right. And we also have that other chart that he was just about to show there. That is slide number 6, please, Chris. And so this is the unemployment rate, and you can see it. Obviously, it had a big spike in 2020. We're kind of right back into trend. He did mention labor force participation rate. And there is a lot of maybe discrepancies here between the two different kind of unemployment surveys. So actually, Chris, if you could go to slide number 9, this shows the difference between the household survey and the establishment survey. And the red line measures employees, and the green line measures jobs. So that means since May, that's when the total number of employees peaked. There now is a $1.8 million job differential. So that's people getting second and third jobs. So this labor market that's tight really isn't all that tight. People are just leaving the labor force in droves. Powell's also talked about the great retirement boom, or something they're calling it, where people are retiring early and they're leaving the labor force, and so the labor force participation rate just continues to decline. All right, so CK, do you have any thoughts on unemployment and what Powell said?
Well, I mean, we did talk about earlier in an earlier episode, this kind of trend that is really gaining steam, which is taking multiple remote jobs and working 3 or 4 multiple remote jobs. So, what we're seeing, at least anecdotally, is the most productive people are, running 2 to 3, maybe even more full-time jobs. And then there's this mass exodus of people leaving. On top of that, when people early retire, I think that there's this like meme that older folks are like not with it or anything like that. But in reality, when it comes to a lot of labor, a lot of skilled labor, a lot of white collar labor, older folks are the most experienced, most senior, most productive people there. So if you see kind of like this brain drain of experienced people before the appropriate amount of time for younger folks to kind of get acclimated to different industry, that could affect productivity as well. So, I mean, I personally like to zoom out a lot here and say that human action is influenced by the type of money that we use, and the way that human action is being kind of influenced by bad money, by the US dollar today, by the incentives that are created, known or unknown by the Fed and other financial institutions that are kind of controlling how this money works. It's breaking down, and people are, I think they're reacting logically to the incentives that are in front of them. They're not getting jobs because, for a number of reasons, but primarily, that's not really where money comes from anymore. Money is kind of decreed out, and the incentives are driving people to do what pays them. And sometimes unemployment and retirement and, taking out of your 401k and pension is what pays you better than toiling at a job you don't care about.
Yeah, great points there. Also, the people that retire early, they aren't paying income tax anymore. They'll probably be paying some taxes on their, selling and living off their investments, unless they're in a, tax exempt sort of IRA or whatever you have. And
regardless, taxes are going down from that.
Tax receipts. Yeah, tax receipts are going down, but also passive investing. So, past one of the things that has been really sea change over the last 20, 30 years is the amount of people just passive investing. And if the most productive people are retiring early, that is less of that monthly buying that is happening in the markets. So very, very interesting. Okay, are we ready for the next clip? All right, let's do it.
The median projection in the SEP for the unemployment rate rises to 4.6% at the end of next year. Inflation remains well above our longer run goal of 2%. Over the 12 months ending in October, total PCE prices rose 6%. Excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 5%. In November, the 12-month change in the CPI was 7.1%, and the change in the core CPI was 6%. The inflation data received so far for October and November show a welcome reduction in the monthly pace of price increases. But it will take substantially more evidence to give confidence that inflation is on a sustained downward path. Price pressures remain evident across a broad range of goods and services. Russia's war against Ukraine has boosted prices for energy and food and has contributed to upward pressure on inflation.
All right. So,
And whenever these people talk about CPI and inflation, I just can't. I can't do it. I can't handle it.
yeah. I mean, what's stuck out to me there is this sustained downward path, and they need substantially more evidence of inflation coming down, quote unquote, inflation coming down. But they can't, let's say they get this sustained evidence in 6 months. They're like, okay, we have enough evidence now. But there's some other war that kicks off, right? Maybe China invades Taiwan, and then boom, prices go way back up again. The thing is that they are totally conflating prices with money printing. So I think that's very important to note. But also, this gives us a chance to jump into discussion on CPI here. So we're going to break in to Powell, and we're going to go over a few slides for the CPI. Right before I do that,
jump in?
Yeah, go.
Can I just jump in on the conflation between CPI and money printing?
Yeah.
Like CPI is a measurement of prices, and those prices are affected by a number of different things. Powell said it in the clip right before this, like the war in Ukraine is affecting energy costs and food costs. Like, that's not money printing. That's not inflation. It's not inflation. That is war. Like, that's why those prices are going up. So whatever you think you're doing that's combating CPI prices is a moot point. And that's why I just can't take it seriously. Like, it's one of those things where I'm just like face palming infinitely because of how dumb he sounds once you kind of like logically align this reality, which is that CPI doesn't equal money printing. It's just measuring prices.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so let's get into the CPI that did come out there for November. Month on month, it was 0.1%. So that is the 5th month in a row with a very low month over month print. The year over year rate that you hear people talk about, 7.1%, that you can just forget about that, because we are worried about what the actual prices are doing right now. If you take the last 5 months, so July through November, and you annualize that, CPI should only be 2.4% on an annualized basis. If we get one more month, let's say December comes in and it's 0%, okay, month over month, that gets us down to 2%. And that's the goal of the Fed. The problem is that they're looking at the wrong number. Obviously, they're looking at the year over year. And now we have 5 months of evidence saying that inflation has peaked, or CPI has peaked. Now, when they look at core and stuff, that's a little bit different. But let's dive into a couple more charts. So, Chris, could you pull up number 10? This shows just the year over year inflation rate, and you can notice that it goes in cycles. It usually peaks and comes down pretty rapidly, right? Well, we've peaked right now, and we're going to come down rapidly. There isn't really any place on the chart that looks like we look today, with the top and starting to back down, that didn't just drop precipitously after that. So pretty much CPI, especially on the year over year, CPI has peaked and it's rolling over. Let's go to the next slide. CK, jump in whenever you want. This one is a month over month, and I did a really long-term chart. You can see it includes the 70s. And when you go back to on the left of that
Love
chart,
it. It's always best to zoom out.
Yeah, when you go back in the 70s, when we had, the great inflation, that's what they call it from back then, you can see that there was a lot of space between the zero line and the rate for a long time. Pretty much the whole decade, it's really high up there. Now, if you go all the way to the other extreme on the right-hand side of the chart, that's right now. It barely has a little gap there underneath the blue line before the axis, and now we're back down to zero. So, let's go to the next one. This is just zoomed in here, showing since pretty much the great financial crisis. And showing that we have hit peak CPI and we're coming down. And the last one I have here, CK, that you might find interesting. So let's go to the next one. This is CPI less shelter. And, we talk about the shelter component being a huge lagging indicator, especially right now. So if you take shelter out and you look at CPI, we're negative. It's like negative 0.4%. So once that shelter starts rolling over, I totally expect over the next few months, we're going to start getting some negative CPI prints. And when that happens, the year over year number is going to, just dive off a cliff and come right back down to 1-2%. All right. So those are the extra CPI charts I have. Do you have any comments on those, CK?
I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, you've been talking about how rates are going down and CPI is coming down. You can go look at the gas pump right now, and it's much cheaper than it was. It's very noticeably cheaper. Like, it's so much cheaper that I didn't know how to estimate how much it was going to take to fill up my car the other day because I was just not used to it. But yeah, I think that cost of living element, that is one of those things that really strikes people in the face, especially people that are currently kind of in this transition from home to home or contract to contract or lease to lease right now, because it is still so inflated, especially across the US. I'd be very curious to see what the public sentiment is with prolonged lower fuel prices, as you say, with the turnover and stuff like that. It's been interesting kind of, being able to ask normal people about how all of this is affecting them. And for many people, they're still unable to, get favorable terms on loans and stuff like that. So until that starts changing, I can imagine that there's going to kind of be this lull in housing and other markets where it's not really reacting to everything else in the market.
Absolutely. And think about so that last chart I showed which was CPI less housing. If you have been on the same lease or with the same mortgage, right, a fixed rate mortgage, you're actually experiencing negative CPI right now. That's pretty crazy to think about.
Yep. I mean, I'm trying to think where else. I feel like spending is still, life is still expensive right now, but
Food.
That's just a gut feeling. Yeah.
Food, definitely. I've noticed that food is a big one, especially for us. We have 4 kids, and man, these kids they'll eat you out of house and home with these high grocery prices. But anyway,
is that what's reflected in the data as well? Is that food and housing is still extremely expensive?
Yeah, food and housing are kind of like the stickier ones at this time, but other goods and energy, they're dropping. They're dropping rapidly. So energy, like you said, gas prices coming down. Energy prices are really pulling down a lot of things. And since that is baked into the cake in pretty much everything we do, lower energy prices means everything is going to start coming down. And hopefully that does pull food down as well. But anyway, you ready for the next one?
Let's do it.
All right.
for total PCE inflation is 5.6% this year and falls to 3.1% next year, 2.5% in 2024, and 2.1% in 2025. Participants continue to see risks to inflation as weighted to the upside. Despite elevated inflation, longer-term inflation expectations appear to remain well anchored, as reflected in a broad range of surveys of households, businesses, and forecasters, as well as measures from financial markets. But that is not grounds for complacency. The longer the current bout of high inflation continues, the greater the chance that expectations of higher inflation will become entrenched.
All right. So that was the end of the main part where he was talking about the economy. Then he gets into talking specifically about the what they have done, what their policy is. So he breaks down his press conference very logically. He talks about the economy, then about what they're doing. Of course, I said they raised 50 basis points, and they're going to take a step-by-step or a meeting-by-meeting approach to this. And he didn't really let on what they're going to do at the next meeting or what they're planning to do, other than they're going to continue until the job is done. He used that phrase over and over again. But that's all I have to set up this next clip. It's kind of a short one. So are you ready to watch that one through, CK?
Let's do it, baby.
All right.
At today's meeting, the committee raised the target range for the federal funds rate by a 0.5 percentage point, bringing the target range to 4.25% to 4.5%. And we are continuing the process of significantly reducing the size of our balance sheet. With today's action, we have raised interest rates by 4.25 percentage points this year. We continue to anticipate that ongoing increases in the target range for the federal funds rate will be appropriate in order to attain a stance of monetary policy that is sufficiently restrictive to return inflation to 2% over time. Over the course of the year, financial conditions have tightened significantly in response to our policy actions. Financial conditions fluctuate in the short term in response to many factors, but it is important that over time they reflect the policy restraint that we're putting in place to return inflation to 2%. We are seeing the effects on demand in the most interest-sensitive sectors of the economy, such as housing. It will take time, however, for the full effects of monetary restraint to be realized, especially on inflation. In light of the cumulative tightening of monetary policy and the lags with which monetary policy affects economic activity and inflation, the committee decided to raise interest rates by 50 basis points today, a step down from the 75 basis point pace seen over the previous 4 meetings. Of course, 50 basis points is still a historically large increase, and we still have some ways to go. As shown in the SEP, the median projection for the appropriate level of the federal funds rate is 5.1% at the end of next year, a 0.5 percentage point higher than projected in September. The median projection is 4.1% at the end of 2024 and 3.1% at the end of 2025, still above the median estimate of its longer run value. Of course, these projections do not represent a committee decision or plan, and no one knows with any certainty where the economy will be a year or more from now.
All right. So let's take a look at that chart one more time. Chris, if you could pull up slide number 8, please. This is their famous dot plot, and it's just showing you, each dot is a member, and they're saying where they think rates will be. And it looks like next year, he said 5.1%. So that would be raising the Fed funds range another 75 basis points from here, basically, before the end of next year. Now, that doesn't match with what we're seeing from yield curves, right? From other yields. We still have the 10-year that's sitting at 3.5%. We have a 10-year sitting at 3.5%, and they think they can keep rates, the Fed funds range, above 5% for a whole year. I don't think that's possible. He also mentioned over and over again 2%, 2%, 2% as their target. And that's going to be important for the last clip that we show here. But just wanted to point that out here. Lastly, CK, sorry to keep ranting on here, but lastly is this is like a soft pivot, okay? In my opinion, I know people say, oh, you're going to change your definition of what a pivot is. A pivot goes from hiking to cutting. Not necessarily. Okay. If you go back and look at 2019, it was a nice rounded top on the pivot, right? It took them 6 months to start cutting, but once they started cutting it, they really got to zero very quickly. Last month, they added some new language to the press release which was cumulative tightening. And then this month they cut from 75 down to 50. And next month or next meeting, perhaps they just go to zero. So to me, that is a pivot. That is a change of direction. And I think they're trying to slow roll the pivot. All right. What are your thoughts on the dot plot and the pivot? That is it a pivot or not?
Well, I think that, first of all, never apologize for going on a rant, because you are the reason people watch this show. I don't think people actually care about what I have to say in general, but I'm going to say it regardless. I think the narrative here, and what is going to be interesting, is exactly what you're pointing out, which is that the real yields of these bonds are going down. Mm-hmm. They're indicating that interest rates are not going up, that they're actually in the actual market going down. So the thing to watch here is how the Fed will react to, the narrative that they're setting versus what is actually happening in the market and what that divergence looks like. So yes, that's what we're going to continue to call out here on this show and keep watching. And I'm absolutely fascinated, because I think what is happening in the world today is people are waking up to the realities. That is, they're waking up from their Gilman's amnesia, or maybe Gilman's amnesia is like this middle stage. But effectively what that means is, like, you start seeing that the media and you start seeing that all this different stuff is not adding up, and the system doesn't work the way that they say it works. And I think the Fed making massive policy errors and moving forward with their silly CPI equals inflation kind of mindset, it's going to wake a lot of people up. And that is the key here. So maybe 2023 is the year that happens. We will see if they pivot and what their talk track looks like and how it develops.
Absolutely. When you're talking there, I was thinking, like, man, are they going to break something? Are they really going to break something? I think what happens, or the way they think about it is, if we keep going and something breaks, then people believe in us even more, because we broke something, right? But if they err on the other side of being, letting the market actually be in charge, or saying that the market is in charge, telling the truth about these things, then people will start losing confidence in the Fed more. So I think maybe they want to try to break something, or I don't know. It's a very weird.
In clown world, good is bad and bad is good. So yeah. it makes complete clown world logic to me, I guess.
Very, very true. All right, we have one more clip here, and what is interesting about this one is, like I said, that 2%. Their target is 2%, and there's been talk in the macro sphere about, are they going to change that target? Because a lot of people think inflation is not going to come down, or CPI, whatever, is not going to come down. And so they think, oh, well, the Fed will have to change their target, or they'll never reach their target. And so that's been floating around there. But Powell answers that pretty quickly. So let's go to the next clip, please, Chris.
Grady.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Grady Trimble with Fox Business. You've reiterated today, and the committee has reiterated its commitment to that 2% inflation target. I wonder, is there ever a point where you actually reevaluate that target and maybe increase your inflation target if it is stickier than even you think it is?
That's just so changing our inflation goal is just something we're not thinking about. It's not something we're not going to think about. We have a 2% inflation goal, and we'll use our tools to get inflation back to 2%. I think this isn't the time to be thinking about that. I mean, there may be a longer run project at some point, but that is not where we are at all. The committee, we're not considering that. We're not going to consider that under any circumstances. We're going to keep our inflation target at 2%, and we're going to use our tools to get inflation back to 2%.
All right. So he totally shut it down. But he did say something kind of at the end of a sentence there. He said, it might be a longer run project, but not right now. No, we're not even thinking about that. But just saying those words, longer run project, now has opened the door. And a lot of people are saying the Fed is saying inflation is going to be high and they're going to have to increase their target. Now, this also is in context of they have changed their target quite a few times. It used to be they were trying to get to 2%. Then in COVID, remember in like 2020, they added on that they'll let it run hot for a while. They'll overshoot 2% so that they can target average inflation at 2%, not 2% being a ceiling or anything.
We talked about this on the show.
Yeah, so now they are being questioned if they're going to change again. So anyway, what do you think about that, CK? Is it a big deal or not?
I mean, I don't know what we're supposed to do. Are we supposed to read the tea leaves with this guy, or are we supposed to ignore him? I can't tell. So I'll let you read the tea leaves. You're saying it's a big deal. We've been tracking that on this show, and we'll see. We'll see.
All right. Well, that's all I have for the FOMC and the CPI. Should we go through a few charts here, like the Bitcoin chart, and see how it responded this week? Oh, you're muted.
We haven't talked Bitcoin yet on the show, so let's absolutely jump into it, and let's get through some charts, and then maybe we talk Europe.
All right. Chart number 1 here. I just added some important dates onto this chart. You can see Terra Luna, Celsius. Then it looked like we were going to break out, and then FTX collapsed. But this is interesting, guys. And I've said this on my live streams. I've said this on this show several times, that bottom back in June, that's right where we're at right now. So it's been all the way since June, and we're pretty much at the same price. That is extremely strong for Bitcoin, in my opinion. Any thoughts on this chart, CK?
I love the little rocket ship. I love the rocket ship. Yeah, I mean, I am very interested to see what Bitcoin does here. I'm very interested to see if we can kind of get past that resistance that is overhead from the bottom of the Celsius crash. But I've seen sentiment like Bitcoin has bottomed all over Twitter, which makes me think that we're probably in for some more pain. I think it really just depends if this contagion, it seems like the rumblings about the contagion has slowed down, but I just don't think it's over yet. We haven't had a conclusion to Genesis. What has happened to Genesis? I guess we've had a conclusion with, we've had a positive conclusion for the short term with Core Scientific, which is a huge miner. I guess they just got a massive bailout loan. We'll see what happens with Genesis. We'll see what happens with crypto.com. Those rumors swirling around that. Nothing's happened yet. Binance seems to be under stress and being FUDed, which I think when it comes to these exchanges, the FUD is good because we want to stress test them. Saying, oh, here's proof of reserves, blah, 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 blah. The only real proof of reserves is, can I withdraw the money? So if they're solvent, they're solvent. It shouldn't be an issue. If they're rehypothecating, not managing risk correctly, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So this chart is kind of busy, but if you go to the next chart, Chris, it's just a much more plain chart, and you can see that resistance zone that we're going up into. This week, surprisingly, has been strong. Bitcoin has kind of, I mean, it's still correlated with the stock market at this point, but I think it's looked stronger. It definitely has looked stronger over the last couple of weeks than the S&P 500. So, yeah, I just wanted to point that out. All right, let's go on to the next slide. This is one that I talked about during the FOMC section.
This one's important. This is the most important chart of the show every single week, y'all. So pay attention.
Yeah, you can see the 5, 10, 30, all of them are under the previous Fed funds range. This new Fed funds range now has leapfrogged above the 2-year even. And the 1 year and the 6 month, they're inside that new Fed funds range. So the Fed really doesn't have any place to go. And we'll see if this affects the rates. If the Fed is really in charge of setting interest rates, we should see these rates climbing, right? But we don't. We see them actually falling. And yeah, so interesting chart. Any comments, CK?
Like I said, this is the most important chart. Ansel, you should tweet this chart out and just say, "Is the Fed in charge?" ? And that's it. That's been your thesis. That's been the thesis on the show. And we've been watching this chart continue to escalate. And it's like the yields for these bonds are going down, and yet the Fed continues to stair step up. So something's got to give. Something's got to give.
Yeah, just look at this chart and then ask yourself, if the rates keep diving, how fast is the Fed going to cut rates when they cut rates? It could be extremely quick. They could cut rates by 100 basis points, boom, or even 200 basis points. I mean, they have 4% to deal with. They could really cut 2 basis points all at once to catch back down to the market. But yeah, very interesting chart. Okay, last chart I have here of just macro is the S&P 500. Really bad day today. The market did not like what Powell had to say, and they didn't. I mean, CPI was amazing, and everything rallied real hard. Then Powell came out and poured some cold water on it. It is in a support area. If it gets support here, then it can bounce. It's not horrible. Like everybody seems to think the S&P 500 and the stocks in general are going to crash through the floor. But look, it's still 10% off the bottom. I don't see why people are so concerned just by looking at this chart. So any thoughts on the stock market, CK?
I mean, you are the rebel Bitcoiner. You're the one who's bullish on stocks right now. Yeah, I mean, you're completely right. We are off the bottom from October, so it's been worse. And if you are correct that the Fed is going to pivot, and if you are correct that they may have to adjust a lot to match up with real yields, we could see all the cash that's currently sitting on the sidelines, pour back into risk. So, if you this could be a great stacking opportunity if you want to allocate to the stock market. I know that I'm mostly just focusing on Bitcoin these days,
obviously,
but
yeah.
If things turn here, or if the Fed is forced to change, or they break something, I think that bodes well for Bitcoin, and it probably bodes well for other scarce things.
Yep. All right, so those are all my charts for today. Should we go in? How much time we got? About 15 minutes left. Let's
yeah, probably 10 minutes. Yeah, let's hit Europe, and then we'll wrap it up.
All right, so the last one I have here, slide number 14. So the ECB, supposedly it's the second most important central bank. I don't know. It's nobody even talks about it. It doesn't even make any headlines really at all. But since we are a central bank show, I wanted to talk about it.
Yeah. We talk about it a lot.
So here we go.
Hey, just talking about how relevant they are is a big talking point, I think. And back to you. Sorry.
True. Okay, so the Governing Council today decided to raise the 3 key ECB interest rates by 50 basis points, and based on the substantial upward revision to the inflation outlook, expects to raise them further. In particular, the Governing Council judges that interest rates will still have to rise significantly at a steady pace to reach levels that are significantly restrictive to ensure timely return to inflation of 2% medium-term target. So it sounds very much like the Fed. Moving down here. So then beginning in March of 2023 and onwards, they're going to begin QT. So they are going to decline their QT at a rate of, or decline their balance sheet at a rate of 15 billion euros per month. That's what they announced. Next slide. Moving on, they talked about their inflation. I follow their inflation, but a lot of people, they don't follow what's going on in Europe. And if you think that the US is having bad inflation, Europe is way worse. So the Governing Council decided to raise interest rates today and expects to raise them significantly further because inflation remains far too high and is projected to stay above the target for too long. According to Eurostat's flash estimate, inflation was 10% in November, slightly lower than the 10.6% recorded in October. The decline results resulted mainly from lower energy price inflation. Food price inflation and underlying price pressures across the economy have strengthened and will persist for some time. Skipping down here, the euro area economy may contract in the current quarter and next quarter, owing to the energy crisis, high uncertainty, weakening global economic activity, and tighter financing conditions. So yeah, that's all I have for their statement. As you can see, it sounds a lot like Powell, a lot like the United States. They have higher inflation, they have higher problems, yet they have not raised nearly as much as the Fed has. And they're facing
they're behind.
They're behind, and they're facing a worse energy crisis, obviously, than the United States is. So, not looking good for Europe right now. What are your comments there, CK?
Clearly reacting to the Fed, I think. And when there was a clip on Twitter of Powell saying that he's going to be raising interest rates by 50 basis points, and I just retweeted it and I said, the Fed punching down on the rest of the world. I should have said punching down on other central banks, because that's really what he's doing. Whatever the Fed is doing, it is hurting other fiat and other central banks and other people with dollar liabilities. I think that's the key here. But ultimately, we've kind of watched the ECB really, let's just say, maybe challenge the Fed in terms of like they weren't going to follow the Fed's lead. And then they've had to completely 180 and cry uncle. And that has not been helped by Europe's domestic policy, as well as the conflict with that's happening in Ukraine and Russia. All of that has made things a lot more difficult. So you've been pushing a bearish Europe sentiment for a while, and seeing that their central bank is really not all that powerful, and even if the Fed can't do much, they can do even less, and they are really having to force to stick to the Fed's narrative. I think it's bearish for the ECB and continues to confirm the opinion on the show.
Yeah, and it's not only energy, it's also food, because they're kicking out those 3,000 or closing down 3,000 farms in the Netherlands, which is the second largest food exporter in the world, right? They have very productive, like per square meter, it's like one of the most productive places in the world there. So, and they're shutting everything down. That's going to cause food inflation to go up, or food prices, I guess you should say, food prices, on top of these energy prices. And we don't know, man. They've gotten a first couple blasts of cold weather over there too. So we'll see how this goes throughout the winter. So that's all I have. That's all I prepared. Do we have any other topics that you would want to bring up, CK? Oh, muted.
No, I mean, I think that this is a great place to wrap. And, just as winter is starting to pick up, things are cold here in Nashville. We know for certain that things are going to be warming up in the spring, into the summer. May 18th, 2023, Bitcoin 2023. Come celebrate the end of the winter, the end of Bitcoin winter, hopefully. Hopefully Ansel is 100% right, and we can celebrate higher Bitcoin prices and celebrate Bitcoin and come together in person. So don't miss out. May 18th through the 20th. Prices are going up tomorrow. Come see Ansel and I in person, the entire Bitcoin Magazine team, and all of Bitcoin Twitter, the entire Bitcoin industry. So that is my closing shill. You guys can follow me at CK_Starks. This show is dropping every single Thursday. We are keeping track of what is happening at central banks. Ansel is, keeping an eye on all of it and bringing it here to the show. Ansel, where can people learn more about all the amazing work you're doing? I've been loving the Telegram group and the live streams. I've been tuning in every few days just to make sure I stay up to date for this show. Where can other folks stay up to date with your work?
Well, we lost our YouTube channel because supposedly the censors there didn't like one word I said or something. I don't know, but you can listen to my daily live streams on Spaces if you follow me at Ansel Lindner. Also, Telegram is now kind of my home base for all of my content. Go to t.me/Bitcoin and markets. That's it. Let's wrap it.
All right. Chris, thanks for helping us with the show. You're the
Thanks,
man.
Chris.
Everyone watching, thank you so much for tuning in. We will be back next week, and Chris and Nolan will be back tomorrow. Peace.